Okay, so that's one loop. I'm going to look for some more. Now obviously here you would generally try and get loops that blend together. I mean, you might find that just one or two is enough, but I'm going to put a few here just for effect. So let's try just the natural drum kit. Maybe actually, I think let's try some percussion. Okay, this one's 100, so that's a bit slower. But I think this may well work. And this is 8 beats, so that's only 2 bars. So I drag this over. You'll see it only takes up 50% of the space here of this loop. But obviously, if I just hold down Option, I can just copy this over and that'll fit. And let's just look for a few other things. You'll find a few loops like this, which is what's called a one-shot sample. It is a loop, so it'll take up, it'll occupy a space of your project, and you can loop it, but it's basically just one sound. So it's going to be used to emphasize a certain beat. You can just put it where you want it, really. I'm going to drag this one here, and you see there it takes up, okay, it's actually taking up about 2/3 of the bar, but the sound is just on right at the beginning. So the key thing is, if you want this in your project, you need to position it with the start on the beat that you want to hear the sound. So I'm putting this is just a short cymbal crash, and I'm going to put this on the 2nd and the 4th beat just to emphasize those beats. And now I just want one more loop, and I'm going to go for, just to demonstrate, these green ones. Okay, so far we've got audio tracks. I'm going to click on one of these. Now, when you click on them, you won't notice any difference. They will play back as normal. They've got all the same information, so they've got the tempo at 80, 16 beats, so that's 4 bars, 50% match because 80 is quite a bit slower than this one, this track. But if I now drag this onto my track, you'll see something. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this into empty space, because this is a MIDI loop and I don't actually have any MIDI tracks yet. So I'm going to drag it into space, and what it will do is it will create a MIDI track, so a Logic instrument track basically. It will load the instrument that is configured for this loop, which in this case is the drum kit. It's one of the GarageBand instruments, and it will also load any effects that have been set up primarily to go with that instrument. And it will also, instead of loading an audio loop region, it will load the MIDI, like a MIDI loop. So if I click on this, you'll see at the bottom you get the piano roll editor come up, and all the notes will be available as MIDI. So I can just select them individually. Okay, you probably don't hear the kick very well because that's quite low, unless you're listening on bigger speakers. But I can then just edit this loop if I want, just like any other MIDI region. So I'm getting access to this pre-configured loop that's been set up, programmed. Quite a bit of thought has gone into it. It's got its own effect settings. But I can actually edit this in any way I want. So I can move hits around, I can change the sounds, I can delete them. So I just cut away a few bits here. Maybe I'm going to copy a few things in. So I have full access to this. So as I said before, there's not so many of these, but the ones that there are quite useful, particularly if you're just getting started and you maybe want to see, for example, how a drum beat is put together. This will show you the way it's been written, what sounds play at what beats, what instruments are involved. It also means that if you like the sound of a beat but you want to change it a bit, you can do that. And it also means you could blend different loops together, so you could find one of these rock loops and maybe select that, and I could drag this one in here, and I could cut this up and cut this one up and put in elements, mix elements of the two together. Now this being a rock drum is now playing on this instrument, so obviously if you're mixing two loops you do have to decide which instrument you want, but other than that you have a lot of control, and it can be quite a creative feature, so I recommend checking this out. So basically now I've got 3 audio loops and 1 MIDI loop. I'm just going to play them all together. Okay, and that's I think they blend reasonably well. I'm just going to make a few small adjustments. I think I'll maybe take this one make this one a bit quieter. See here I'm using the channel strip where I can have access to the fader, and I can also alter the pan here, so that alters the position of the sound. So I'm just going to slightly move these around a bit. I move them around quite a lot actually, just because I've got all these different instruments playing at once. I just want to separate them a bit. And if you're listening on stereo speakers, now if I play this back, you should notice that there's a bit more separation going on there. I could obviously do more to work on that, but that just gives you a bit of an idea of what you can do. Okay, so basically that's the lesson. That shows you how to use the loop browser. Just to recap on what we've covered, we've looked at the media button here and the different tabs that it brings up. So it brings the bin, and now you'll see if I click on the bin it's got some audio in there because we've got these audio loops and they're all shown. And we've looked at the browser for just navigating around the project or navigating to other projects. We've looked at the library for setting up preset instruments. So there's this one. We haven't used that today, but this would be how you'd set up a preset. And we've looked at loops. So we've looked at audio loops and the MIDI loops that you can edit. So that's quite a few things to think about, I think. And I think you'll find this a useful feature when you're getting started, and also as well when you're a bit more experienced you can find that this can be a good way of producing some backing tracks or finding inspiration for whatever it is you're working on. Now obviously today we've just looked at drums. There are all these many other instruments that you can look at, so later on we'll have a look at some of those and see some of the other sounds that you have access to. Okay, thank you.